Hey, I'm Guy.
I'm John.
YouTube channel, subscribe to it. Give this video a like.
Podcast below in the description. I need you to subscribe to that right now. Subscribe.
All right, John, this one's for all the Tostitos. Brent Musburger went on Rich Eisen's show and said a lot about Derek Carr. And the headline of it was, I have to tell you, I'm a little disappointed by the continuing chatter about the Raiders. Talking about Deshaun Watson's name coming up. Talking about, obviously, Russell Wilson's name coming up. He said Derek was a playoff quarterback last year. I mean, they didn't make the
I think
playoffs,
he meant his.
but
I think he meant his type play, which I think we can debate. But
the problem with the Raiders is on defense. Brent's basic point is Derek deserves better than to have his job questioned, his job security questioned, when he was not the problem with the Raiders last year. And on a fundamental level, I would not use the word. He's not saying deserves better. He's not saying that. I wouldn't use that word. But I do understand why somebody would say what he's saying. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, it seems like he lives in Vegas and he was disappointed in the local press in Las Vegas. And this gets back to things we had talked about with things coming out of the Raiders radio network, the Raiders paper that is very intertwined with their organization / the Vegas paper. It's all kind of intertwined. And you and I have dealt with it and said that it was clear from my perspective that anything coming out of certain individuals, Vinny, was coming from the Raiders. Now, he might not like to hear that, and he'll claim that's not true. I just, based off my experience, I feel confident where I'm sitting. And I think reading Brent here, or just his quotes from Rich, one thing I think you could say about Brent, because you'd say historically, even Papa, I love the guy, but when Greg was associated with the Raiders, you got to be very careful about what you say because they get very, very offended very fast. I'd say Brent's at the point. I don't think he gives a shit. And I think sometimes you'll just watch or you click something on YouTube or something be on TV from like the 70s or 80s, and you'll just hear his voice. You realize this guy's been doing this. Just watching high-level shit, baseball, basketball, and football for a long, long time. And I can just imagine, now he's done this role now for whatever, 4 years. But last year, just sitting there watching this offense be really good, and the defense be embarrassing. So maybe it's just a football fan. Now it usually doesn't work like that with the play-by-play guy, but my point is he's a unique play-by-play guy. This job is not, I'm not trying to say like on his tombstone like he's going away anytime soon, but when Brent Musburger's legacy is laid out, I don't even think the Raiders will come up, right? Or they'll be the last thing written that he toward the end of his life he called Raider games, right?
Yeah, you don't get the impression that he loves it is the impression I get, but you don't get the impression that it's like he's willing to do what he's going to change who he is to make sure he keeps a job. And I'm not saying his job's in jeopardy.
I guess what I'm saying is I'm taking him at fair value. Like this is just his opinion. It's not coming from an angle which a lot of times. Definitely in baseball and basketball. Football can be it feels like they allow them to be a little more independent if the guy's older and been with the organization. For example, like Mel Reese with the Eagles, like he'll just say some stuff like, what are they going to do? Fire him? This is not going to happen. Like he's allowed to give his opinion. And my point is I think Brent's allowed to just give his opinion. And it's not even that crazy of an opinion. It's just I think the guy's a playoff level quarterback. He called him a playoff quarterback, a little strong. But playoff level quarterback is strictly the defense. Why are we even talking about this? Which you and I have been talking about the whole time, does make a little sense. Like why Deshaun Watson is a better player. And Brent kind of admitted that. He's like, I'm not saying Derek's better than Deshaun Watson, but are you trying to improve on one side when you're historically terrible on the other side? It doesn't make that much sense unless you go, well, John Gruden's their head coach. He's a crazy man.
We get this a lot on the podcast and on YouTube when we do, because we talk a lot about this because it's constantly a story. It's funny. We did a video at the end after week 17 of the regular season and said the good news for the Raiders. You remember that? Or we did on the podcast too, I think. The good news for the Raiders is this offseason will not be spent talking about Derek Carr. He has solidified himself as the starting quarterback. And he has done everything in his control to solidify his position as the starting quarterback. The problem is, and so when we do these conversations, we get people like, why do you keep talking about it? Well, Deshaun Watson wants to get traded, and anybody and everybody should be interested in Deshaun Watson unless their quarterback is better than Deshaun Watson. And the reason Russell Wilson is a conversation is because Russell's agent told Adam Schefter of the 4 teams he would go to in the NFL, the Raiders are one of them.
Yeah.
And then when asked a few weeks or a month or so ago, Jay Gruden said, yeah, I don't know what brother's ever going to do. So,
well, Guy, originally there was an article way before Russell Wilson, because I do think it's fair to say most people are not pushing back on. I think the Russell Wilson conversation, even with a diehard Raider fan, like, should we be interested? Because he's interested in us. The Deshaun Watson thing started when the Las Vegas paper wrote the Raiders think they can get a 1 and maybe a little bit more if Deshaun Watson would be interested in coming. They could use those picks for a package. Like, we didn't pull that like the Raiders should be in on Deshaun Watson, because that article wouldn't have written. I don't think we would have talked about it. It was literally out there. It became a fucking big story that they would use Derek to leverage some picks to then use the whole Deshaun. Like, it came out of nowhere. And you and I were like, what are they talking about? Like, this is kind of crazy. But I think part of what Brent's realizing is, like, I don't even think it's the Raiders are crazy now. It's the head coach. Like, this is the head coach, who is this powerful guy in the NFL, top 2 or 3 power in the league in terms of just factor in cash, factor in answers to nobody, doesn't really even answer to the owner. That I just think all this stuff is somewhat believable, Guy.
Also has a unique dynamic in that because he worked in TV, he knows a lot. He probably knows more players, like has sat down and talked to more players than most coaches in the league have, right?
Also, since his Raider tenure, has traded 2 very famous players.
That's the other thing. Traded Khalil. Now, Amari was not
traded Amari on the. You traded him on the practice field, though.
Amari was not like well. Amari was not like, oh my God, Amari just had a great year. He's
no,
but still was clearly a very good player, which is why the Cowboys had to, acquire him.
You gave him a first-round pick.
That's what I mean. Had to pay a lot to get him. So
literally
I understand where Brent's coming. Now I would say to Brent, like Brent,
$100 million last year.
Huh?
The Cowboys then gave him. Remember, they gave him Amari a lot of money last year. Yeah, then they had to pay
him because which is fine. But
yeah,
I agree.
You called
with
Amari
Brent.
a Hall of Famer once.
I agree with Brent. I did. Yes, I said he had the feet of Jerry Rice. He's still got time, John.
He's got good feet. He's a good player.
Brent. Maybe I was drinking a lot of I was listening to pop a lot, so I was talking about everybody's feet. Brent's quote: "I have to tell you, I'm a little disappointed by the continuing chatter about the Raiders." Disappointed is an interesting word. Disappointed in part means, I think what he's saying, to your point, why isn't anyone coming out to defend him? Right? That's partly when you say disappointing, isn't that kind of that's kind of how I read that, disappointing. And maybe
it's like John Gruden has released a statement through Chris Mortensen, like, this is stupid. Why are we talking about this? That has not happened.
And also disappointing probably means I'm to your point, I want to call some playoff games here. I'd like for them to get the defense better. I don't think the offense.
I'm not a spring chicken here.
And I don't think the offense is their problem. I understand. I get it.
Disappointing is a strong word.
Yeah. Disappointing is I'm in charge. Not I'm in charge, but you could even make the argument that if
I would say the overwhelming percentage of play-by-play guys in the 3 major sports would never think about using that word.
I'm disappointed. Right. I'm a little disappointed about the continuing chatter about the Raiders. Yeah.
Which is honestly refreshing. This is what, most I wish more of these guys could say.
You could make the case that even if they could trade Derek and 4 ones for Deshaun, that it'd be the wrong thing for them to do. That the quarterback plays good enough.
That's kind of his premise, and what you and I have been talking about for a month. Like, I think Derek might have overachieved a little bit, and I think one thing that's going to be hard for last year, like Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers and Brady, like those guys are good crowds or no crowds. I do think Derek benefited from no crowds because I saw him, and maybe it's just he's comfortable in the offense now. Maybe they're just better. I don't know, but I'm not like all in on this guy being a top 10 quarterback now. I do think he's improved from where I thought he was, like, kind of headed a couple years ago. But I'm just not like, there's not a trajectory that I'm like, oh, I expect this year for him to even be even better, be considered like a top 7 quarterback. Like, I think this might just be what he's at. So honestly, the Gruden thing, like, is this his peak value? But that's a fair, these conversations, I don't mind Gruden having these conversations. Like, it's not even great. You have to. What could we get for Derek? What does it cost to get for Deshaun? The moment you see, hey, John, you see Adam Schefter's tweet, like, well, what would it cost to get? Like, that's normal protocol in the business he's in. But it is something like, I would say it not only hasn't slowed this offseason, feels a little more real. Well, because it's like, well, how would they turn down Russell Wilson?
In years past, it was real because they needed to, they thought maybe upgrade. Now it's real for the reason you said, because there's a value. He has value. You would get a good return if you decided to do it. And you would do it as part of a two-pronged thing because you're acquiring one of these other guys.
Well, I think for sure.
I don't think anybody's wrong here. Like, I don't think Gruden's wrong for looking. I don't think Brent's wrong for going, wait a second.
Yeah. I think they could pick 20 tomorrow from the Bears.
Yeah, I think they'd get more than that.
Probably, but I'm just saying, like, that pick would be the apple of the trade. Like, maybe it'd be like pick 20 and next year's 2 or something, but it'd be like pick 20 this year, equipped with whatever their pick is. What is it, 19? Like, boom, they would have a lot of ammo immediately, right?
They would need a quarterback, yeah. And I don't. So you're saying you get 19 and
well, yeah,
20
you would never do that move without, like, maybe you do that to then, yeah, you'd have to have another move.
Knowing the 19 and 20 and the Bears' future, yeah, it'd be a lot.
Like, if you did think Mariota was sweet, you could easily, like, that is an option. It's not an option because I don't think anyone believes, and they shouldn't, that Mariota's better than Derek. But if you thought they were equals, I think it would be a no-brainer. If, like, it was legitimate, they're equals, you would go with Mariota way cheaper, use that cash to buy players, trade them to the Bears, pick 20, and then all of a sudden you're taking multiple defensive guys. And you feel pretty good about your, situation next year. But the problem is, I think it's fair to say, if let's just use numbers. If Derek's a 10, I'm not saying he's like a 10 out of 10, but if Derek's a 10, what's Mariota? Like a 6, right? So that's a big drop off. If it was like